Hi, I'm Ben Savello. I made a game. I've spent a lot of time over the years experimenting and learning about game development, but Homebound was the first project I planned and executed to completion. In this video, I want to share some of my process and considerations in the sound design for Homebound. But first, a bit about the game. Homebound is a short and sweet game set in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. You play as Sophie, a young girl stuck at home and practically bored to death. While her dad is busy working, she has to keep herself entertained by playing make-believe games at various stations around the apartment. As she uses her imagination, her mood lightens, her mind comes alive, and color begins to return to her little world. Homebound started as a GM48 game jam themed small world. I worked with one other teammate on the original concept, but while we had a lot of fun, we didn't get very far. Afterwards, I decided to remake the game on my own so I could use it as a nice, polished portfolio piece. And within 1 year, I finished the game and published it on itch, complete with a release trailer. I made it pay what you want so anyone can play it. But enough preamble. What about that sound design? There were two main beats I wanted to hit in the audio design for Homebound. First, the quaint homeliness of the apartment and her relationship with her dad. And second, the magical character of Sophie's imagination. This is all symbolic, of course. She's not actually magical. It's meant to evoke her perspective and communicate her emotional space to the player. To this end, the more literal sounds are kept very simple. I recorded all sorts of sounds from around my own apartment. A squeaky door, kitchen utensils, little plastic bowls, that sort of thing. The kinds of sounds Sophie would be most familiar with as a young kid in a small apartment. By contrast, the more magical, imaginary elements were designed with bright, melodic synths. The game's most important moments are when Sophie completes a minigame station and restores some of the world's color. The animation and sound design communicate to the player what they just accomplished, that they've finished this station, it's had a positive effect on the game world, and they can move on to the next one. I wanted it to be a very satisfying moment where the player's brain lights up a bit, the same way Sophie's does. Another important moment of directing player attention is at the beginning of the game, when the minigame stations get activated. Sophie's dad tells her to go use her imagination, at which point the camera pans over to 3 locations around the apartment. One by one, the stations activate with color, an animation, and attention-grabbing audio. The music fades out to underscore the importance of the moment and draw the player's attention in. Since I knew these sounds would play in a specific order, I was able to lean into the musicality of their design. I used very tall, open-spaced chords with lots of color tones on top, but the underlying chord structure is a simple 4-5-1. The open spacing, generous use of upper extensions, and large leaps in the voicings helps make the phrase feel more gestural and less explicitly functional. As a counterexample, here's how it might sound without those factors, with more conventional voice leading. This version communicates a very different message. The tighter voice leading makes it more obviously musical and pulls it out of the game world. The finality of this cadence would suggest that something just finished, whereas the original, more gestural version tells the player that something just opened up and encourages the player to investigate. At the end of the game, after Sophie's had dinner and some playtime with her dad, a 4th station activates, her bed, where she plays one last sheep counting minigame and drifts off to sleep. This activation sound is a continuation of the phrase with a surprising modulation. It moves to a chromatic mediant from the tonic, a harmonic device that's often used to evoke a sense of wonder. By this point, the first 3 chords may have faded from the player's memory, but they'll still hear this harmonic relationship because the music at this point is in the same key as the original chords. Here's all 4 chords in sequence. I used a similar approach in some of the UI sounds. The game has 2 menus. A system menu where players can adjust options, set controls, etc., and a minigame menu, which is how players interact with the minigame stations. The system menu is more straightforward, with snappy, clicky sounds to give the user a sense of tactile feedback. The minigame menu, on the other hand, acts as a sort of conduit directly from the player to Sophie's imagination. For navigating the game list submenu, I used a soft synth playing short melodic gestures, again with a cadential chord structure as the backbone. I took the player actions of scrolling through games, to selecting a game, to starting the game, and loosely mapped them to a predominant to dominant to tonic harmonic structure. If the player selects a game and then backs out, it subverts the resolution to tonic, acting like a sort of deceptive cadence. The end result of this is that interacting with this menu has the grammar of a coherent musical phrase with exposition, tension, and resolution. The arrival at the 1 chord signals that the menu navigation is over, while the final note ending on the 5th primes the player to get ready for the game that's about to start. The last topic I'd like to cover here is the voice design for the 2 characters. The voices are entirely synthesized, with a unique voice for each character, including a few variations for different moods. I got a lot of comments that the voices sound like Celeste, and it's hard to miss the influence there. I designed the voices in Serum, where I started by just drawing a waveform. I kind of just fiddled here until I got something workable. My idea was that all the funky irregularities in these waveforms would make for a unique vocal timbre for each character, imitating the sonic subtleties of the human voice. I then mapped the mod wheel to a bunch of parameters like coarse pitch, waveform bending, and EQ bands and filters. From there, I just played random notes in a small vocal range with various inflections on the mod wheel. To reflect different moods, I just transposed the pitch to different ranges and tried out different mod wheel inflections. To implement the dialogue sounds in-game, I used a dialogue system that I'd already built for a previous project, and I'd initially designed it with audio like this in mind. As the system draws text to the screen, it animates the character portraits every few text characters, making the mouth open and close. To match the text more closely, it checks what character it's currently adding to the string and acts accordingly. For example, the mouth will be open on vowels and closed on certain hard consonants and spaces. A similar system is at play for the audio. A sound will play every few characters, provided it's not a space or punctuation. The system chooses which sound to play depending on the character speaking and their mood. To make the dialogue feel less robotic, the system automatically pauses briefly at punctuation and uses tags to affect various parameters in the text like animation, speed, extra pauses, and mood. In this case, 8 sound variations per mood was enough to make the dialogue sound natural and expressive. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to leave a comment below or reach out on Twitter or email. I've included a link to Homebound's itch page in the description in case you'd like to check it out for yourself. Until next time.